Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
I'm your host, Sandy Wilder, today, and we're glad you joined us for Austin Faith Dialogue. Today we're talking about the Travis County Community Justice Center, a whole new concept in criminal justice, and there are three people with us today to talk about this new ministry. We have Lawrence Valtz, who's with the Criminal Justice Planning System, Trish Merrill, who's done special projects, especially in substance abuse, for the Texas Conference of Churches, and Pat Flood, who's the Executive Director of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. Good to have all three of you. My guess is, as we start the conversation, that there are lots of people who have never even heard the term Travis County Community Justice Center. So maybe we ought to talk first about what this project is.
What the Community Justice Center is Austin's opportunity to make a difference in the life of low-level offenders from Travis County. In 93, the legislature gave Travis County pilot legislation to do something different and holistic in addressing the needs of offenders. Travis County felt that it doesn't make any sense to send offenders away 200 miles to prison and bring them back the same or better criminals than they were. So we've assembled over 100 people to look at the various aspects of offenders' lives as far as rehabilitation is concerned. There are 11 transition committees, and the committees are responsible for trying to help the offender transition back into the community, develop that safety net that hadn't been there in the past, and also working with the Community Justice Center to give them some direction as to what's really needed in the community, what's available in the community. So the program that they are exposed to while in the center, they can also be exposed to as well when they leave the center. And we're trying to take a holistic approach, addressing the needs. Usually send them, you have a bricklaying program and you may have a GED program, but here we're looking at the holistic needs, not only the offender, but the offender's family as well. So it's an opportunity for the families to come together and make a difference in the lives of their loved ones. And the people that will be out there will be low-level, non-violent offenders, your drug and property offenders, hot check writers, people who hadn't been paying child support, those type of offenders.
Okay. Now, I understand that this is a model program, and I wonder in what sense is the Community Justice Center different from other places where nonviolent offenders are?
Well, it's a model program by intent and design, and because of the low-level offender that is there. But it's also to be a center for the communities. Part of that is bringing the community into the jail, as it were. So the mere fact that they call it a Community Justice Center shows a change in outlook and perception of what is going to take place within this facility, and with an emphasis of reentry into the community. So in that sense, it's a real model. Now, there's concerns, I know in the past, because we work in the community, in the neighborhood about, here we're going to have another facility. In some ways, there is a real hope and the real intent that this will be a positive for the community and a place where the families can come in and work with persons there, and where we can really have a focus on rehabilitation, on reentry back into the community. So that's a unique model, I believe, really within the state. Wouldn't you say that, Lawrence? Is it being done anywhere else in the state?
It's not being done as extensively as we're doing, and the uniqueness is the community involvement. The community has begun to take ownership for the problems that Austin has, and Austin is unique in itself, and this is another unique project for the city of Austin.
Okay, good. Now, where exactly are we talking about? Where's the project located, and how many people might we be talking about, and just some of the nuts and bolts of this?
It's located out on FM 969. It's a 1,000-bed facility for males and females. And just to give you a background of some of the programs that will be there, there'll be a lot of life skills programs, substance abuse treatment, GED education, vocational type programs, family programs. The transition committees will also be looking at addressing the housing needs of the offenders when they come out, the spiritual, the victims. There's a whole array, mental health needs, substance abuse, everything that hadn't been looked at in the past.
Substance abuse was mentioned, and Trish, how is the Community Justice Center model different from, say, the work you've been trying to do through congregations in terms of addressing substance abuse problems?
Well, in some ways, it's not different. When people get in trouble with drugs and alcohol, they are also in a spiritual crisis. And I think the folks that we'll see in the center will be in a spiritual crisis. They will have hit bottom. They will have problems with relationships to one another, relationships to a higher power, to God. They'll be really hurting. And I think the work that I've done with churches in terms of team ministry around substance abuse will fit in very well in relating to the center, because the majority of people who will be in the center will have substance abuse issues, and they will need to heal spiritually. They'll need to grow spiritually. We know that for people to really recover from substance abuse, they need to begin to have a spiritual awakening and then begin to grow spiritually and really change their priorities and their understanding of their own identity and heal. And so whether that's from a particular religious background or not, I think that the work that I've done in the community will link up very well to the center.
Okay. You talked some about a conversion experience, and I know that many criminal justice facilities do have chaplains on staff and probably volunteers coming in and out who come from congregations. How is this Community Justice Center different in terms of what it provides for the spiritual nurture of the persons there? Maybe.
Well, it remains to be seen how different it will be, because, see, it's coming into existence. But I think that the major distinction is that spirituality is an integral part of the rehabilitative process. And that recognition of that spiritual crises or self-identity, if we're really going to deal with human beings holistically, as Lawrence is talking about, then that whole question of who I am, how do I relate to my family, how do I relate to community, what are the relationships, what are my self-worth, and what is the worth of the community, how does that relate to powers beyond us, you know, and then from a religious standpoint to a higher power. Okay, taking that not just as a private, personal conversion experience that we normally would associate with religious activity. You know, you want to see the pastor, okay, the pastor comes in and you have this little, or not little, I mean, interchange and a long growth. But rather, it's a recognition by society that we are in spiritual crises, as Trish would say, you know, in relationship to chemical abuse, and that there has been destructive forces within families, within our society. And that doesn't mean that families are bad or those who are there are bad. It's just that the forces that converge upon them have been weakening these structures. And so that the spiritual crisis has to be headed or looked at straightforward and try to build that in to the rehabilitation process. So it's not just a social work dimension in the traditional sense, or a workshop, or getting a person the tools. It's also getting the person to identify that they have worth, and other people have worth and deserve respect. And then there's responsibility, you know, as rights. All those are spiritual questions, which are related to religion, but which are even beyond religion.
A question for Lawrence. You've worked in the criminal justice system in the past and now on this Community Justice Center.
Yes.
And you've been, I think, helping coordinate the work of some of these transition committees. What specifically has this spiritual transition committee been about? What has been its task, and what has it decided to do?
One thing that the spiritual committee has said and done in its work is that the facility has to be a people-friendly, volunteer-friendly type facility. And in order to have that spiritual awakening, the staff at the facility will be the kind of personnel where the offender will want to heal, where the offender or the resident will be able to heal because of the atmosphere and the type of personnel. And one thing that the Spiritual Committee has been charged with is to look at what are the specific needs of residents. What can the faith community do to address the healing process of people who have gotten in trouble with the law? How can the faith community help me heal as an offender? And they've looked at that holistically, not just from a specific denomination, but from an inner being type deal as to what the faith community can really do. And they've come up with some strategies. They've looked at the problem. They've looked at the gaps that exist, the resources that are available in the community to address the needs of the person that's going to be out at the center, as well as some specific strategies as to how we go about bringing in volunteers to help in the process.
A whole different approach to working with offenders. Well, let's pretend that we've got a person coming to the center, and I know that the ministry probably won't get off the ground for another few months. But suppose someone has been assigned to the Travis County Community Justice Center, shows up, then what? Then what'll happen? How do you see the volunteers, say, in the Spiritual Transition Committee taking and working with them?
Well, one of the things is, I think the community, and specifically the faith community, has really got to change their attitude about people who've gotten in trouble. And it's somewhat akin to the person who's gotten in trouble with substances. The sense and the hope that people can heal and can be rehabilitated or can learn new skills and can heal and receive the forgiveness they need to move on. I think, you know, the community's got to believe that, the faith community's got to believe that. And people within the structure have got to treat people as if they can heal and as if there is hope for them building a new life. Immediately, someone going into the system, if the faith community is aware, can support the family in terms of their healing and their relationship to the person in the center. But the Spiritual Transition Committee worked on things like just principles of functioning within the system so that people did have an opportunity to go to religious events, a Bible study, worship, etc., that fit their own religious needs. And we really did a little looking into the research and understood that many people who get involved in religious activities within a center, it does help. It reduces recidivism. We know that people can heal, and probably the more active they are in religious activities that suit their needs, the more rapidly they can heal, the better the possibility for their recovery will be. So I think you know, individuals within the system will be treated with as valued, respected persons who have hope and healing and meaning for their life. And then I think as we as a community surround the families, we can also have that expectation. Not having the sense that, okay, the person has done something wrong, now we've locked them up and they're gone. But having that sense of, these are people that we want to help. They will be coming back into our community. They're our loved ones, they're our family members, they're our neighbors. And so the investment is very different. The outlook is very different, it seems to me.
How has the work, say, that Austin Metropolitan Ministries has done in the formation of this center been different, say, from the work that any other prison-related group would do, Prison Fellowship or Kairos or any of those that are already operating? What have we here in Austin done differently?
Well, I have great respect for those groups, you know, because they go into the institution, wherever it is, and enter into a one-on-one personal relationship and offer opportunities, which are very limited, of course, if someone's in a state facility for growth. But I think the emphasis Austin Metropolitan Ministries has placed, we all have a mentoring program at Gardner Best for young first offenders. In a sense, this is sort of parallel, except we're dealing with 10 to 14-year-olds here. We're in this program, you're dealing with 18 to maybe 30-year-old, mostly 18 to 25. So it's sort of, but both are first offenders, are very nonviolent people. And the perception from our standpoint is that it isn't just a justice question that you have to pay back to society. That's sort of like a human rights, like civil rights. You know, the victim and society has rights to be protected. But there is also within the community, and we hear much of that now, is community responsibility, that these are our people, that they are not separated out from not being a resident of Austin, and that there is a sharing and a responsibility that we would have, and how do you give expression, specific expression to that sharing and responsibility? Meaning it's one thing to say it, you know, and you can go on forever. How do you institutionalize, in a sense, you know, formalize that relationship? With the mentoring program with the youth that we're dealing, there are mentor-mentee, but there is also a sense of responsibility back to the congregation. That the congregation, this is the congregation's child. This isn't just a one-on-one relationship, social service, you see. And so that whole question of building community and serving community, which is very, very much talked about now in many, many fields, you know, that we have gone down the route of rights. Now we have to continue on the route of rights, but also responsibilities. And how do we build that is really the question.
A whole different kind of approach. There's lots more good conversation here with these three about the Travis County Community Justice Center. Stay with us for the next half of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
We're glad you're with us for Austin Faith Dialogue today as we talk about the Travis County Community Justice Center. We've been having a good conversation with today's three guests, Patrick Flood, Trish Merrill, and Lawrence Valtz. And as we continue talking about the project that we've got here, I wonder how any of you might see us then influencing with our Community Justice Center. What goes on in other places in their criminal justice system? How do you see our model making a difference for what other communities are doing?
One thing I see, Sandy, is in particular vocational skills. The skills that we'll be teaching the people out at the center will be what is the need. We'll look at the need of the Austin job market and make sure that they are trained around whatever specific need is of the Austin job market. We won't give them just your basic type vocational program, but we'll look at the needs of Austin, try to make sure that the person has the skills when he or she leaves the facility to immediately go into the workplace of Travis County. We know Austin is a high-tech community, and one of our goals is to work with some of the high-tech companies to make sure that we have a trained workforce so the business community can benefit from this as well as an opportunity to have a skilled labor force to choose from once the offender leaves the facility.
Makes good sense. What about the spiritual component? Trish, how might you see that component changing what happens with criminal justice systems in other parts of the state or the country, for that matter?
Well, I think that in our communities, we really need an attitude change about what is happening. And I think if we see a successful partnership with the faith community and the Community Justice Center here, and we see a volunteer-friendly place where there are mentors, where there are some religious services that meet people's needs, where there is that focus on spiritual growth, I think people will flock to us in terms of how we are doing this and how it's working. I mean, the research seems to indicate that it does make a difference. And we kind of all know that in the back of our minds, that in order to really change your behavior and really see yourself differently, you have to have a conversion of your heart or a sense of a difference about your future. A lot of the programs around the country that are trying to deal with this issue are very much aware that people need a change of heart, a conversion, that there is a spiritual component. And in the secular world, you'll hear this talked about. So it seems to me that if we really do get involved and invested and really help people, we will be enriched by the people that are recovering, and are rehabilitated. It will help our own community, and it will help us grow, because we will learn something that's real important for our future.
There's a great deal of literature now and research on illness, physical illness, you see, and recovery and healing in physical illness. And the literature all points to, and a very much higher percentage of people recover or heal or participate if they have a very strong sense of spirituality, who they are, who they're working with, and who powers within their life that they have no control but faith in that positive thing. Okay, there is not that literature yet developed in relationship to crime, but that's an illness. That's a very real reality of destructive of the human personality, participated by the individual as well as by society. And so it makes sense that we are right at the edge of growth. I think the other question that I think the viewing audience would raise is, what about the victim? I mean, these people are offenders, you know, what about the victim? I think the same question has to be focused there, that the offender has to realize that there is a victim. That the spiritual awakening means that there is someone outside of themselves that they have hurt desperately, and how that begins to deal with that spiritual awakening, how we begin to bring that victim in to this process is another challenge. So it's a brand new arena that is opening in relationship to a much needed crisis, crime within our society, and stopping it and giving alternatives to it, and certainly doing it with the least offensive so that they don't become more offensive. That's a payoff to total society. But you can't do it if you don't have a payoff to the individual. It's not, you can't separate it out.
And I think part of that spiritual conversion comes through being confronted by the victim, admitting I have done wrong, and being sincere in admitting, in the spiritual healing, the growth begins, and I begin to have that spiritual conversion. I begin to grow. But I have to admit that I have done wrong, and that's part of that restoring me to wholeness. Also a possibility of me restoring the victim to wholeness. And we've looked at the victim aspect also, because one of our transition committees is a victim assistance committee. So we make sure that we, in our holistic approach, we made sure that we brought everybody that's affected in, not only just the offender, but the person that the offender has perpetrated or caused some harm and danger to.
I know that I hear over and over again that the United States has the highest rate, percentage, whatever, of violence of any society in the world. I would like to think that we also have the highest rate of volunteerism. And we haven't talked a whole lot about the specific role of volunteers in the whole rehabilitation process here and in the ongoing work of the center. Now, we're talking today, or people listening today are folks with a faith background. What might we say to people of faith as their role, what their role could be as volunteers in the Community Justice Center? Start with you, Trish.
Well, one of the things that we're very aware of is that we want it to be a volunteer-friendly place, and we want to bring volunteers in, and we want volunteers to be very well trained. We would not want to put anybody in a situation where they didn't really have skills and didn't know what they were doing. We have not finalized exactly how we're going to do that, because it's opening in the future. So I think anyone who's really interested in doing that would contact Patrick at AMM or somebody for a future date. But I think, you know, whether you're a person who's going into that setting and mentoring, for instance, which is really, as far as I'm concerned, a ministry of presence. It has to do with being with people in such a way that they're valued. We know that mentoring, just being with a person 1 hour every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, makes a difference in people's lives. It has to do with just valuing. And you don't have to fix them, you don't have to bring them gifts, you don't have to do lots of things for them, but to be with them. So I think there'll be specific roles for volunteers in mentoring. There will be specific roles for folks of religious faith to come in and help in terms of religious services and counseling and that sort of thing. And they'll have an opportunity for training. But here on this program, we're really speaking to the whole faith community, and I think the attitude in which people view this center and the attitude with which they roll up their own sleeves and say, let's help any way we can, whether we're going into the center and working one-on-one, or whether we're working with families and we're trying to surround these people, keep them connected within our congregation, offer their children services, keep loving them, not let them get distance from us. To me, the volunteering goes on at lots of different levels. But I would hope that we would really include lots of folks from this community in actual volunteering in the center, giving of their time and becoming well-trained to do that in whatever aspect that they want to do that.
Right, it's still to be developed.
I think the important thing is, and because there's so much conversation now, it's changed at the federal level, state level, local level, of that much can be done in the private side of society, not on the governmental side of society. Well, without getting into that debate, of course, what I'm trying to say is that there's a very important, as Trish pointed out, that you would have professional competency. I mean, who is a chaplain, and what kind of a person is a chaplain? Who is a volunteer coordinator at that facility, you see, who will be able to be open to this training process, you see, so that, because it is not going to happen if we just think, well, okay, we're not going to do it now from a governmental standpoint or a professional standpoint, and we're going to now go to volunteerism. No, but rather there's this reservoir of goodwill. People are more busy now than ever, so I mean, volunteers are very selective, you see. What can they do that will make a difference? And what kind of professional training and resources can be provided to volunteers so that they feel comfortable at whatever level they're participating? So that's part of that whole volunteer question.
Right. And I think people watching today might be interested in taking a look at how much work has gone on behind the scenes already. I think we have a shot of the manual that has been put together. Even though the center is not open yet, there's still been an enormous amount of work done by these 11 transition committees, representing countless volunteer hours over this past year. And unfortunately, just a half an hour is not near enough time to talk as much as we might like. We'll have to have you all back. But thank you for coming today to talk about this really exciting model. And we thank you for joining us as we begin to explore how the Austin community can respond to nonviolent offenders in a creative, loving, supportive way. We'll look forward to more news from the Community Justice Center as it gets off the ground. And we'll look forward, of course, to seeing you next week on Austin Faith Dialogue. Thank you for joining us.
And for spending the time with us.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.